Now we're going to talk about relationships and what happens when two tables love each other. So far, all of our queries have relatively been one-to-one. Not relatively, they've actually been one-to-one, right? Where I write a query and I get one row back for it. I look up something in a spreadsheet and I get one row back from it. That's kind of the methodology that we've been looking at. But now we're going to start thinking about recipes, right? A recipe contains ingredients. So you can think of something like a tomato. How many different recipes contain tomatoes, right? It's going to be on pizza, it'll be on spaghetti, it'll be in a BLT, right? So one tomato belongs to multiple recipes, right? But in the same direction, a recipe contains many ingredients, right? It's not that just one recipe is just a tomato. It's kind of a dumb recipe at that point, right? It has many ingredients in it. So a recipe has many ingredients. Ingredients belong to many recipes. This is called a many-to-many relationship. Does that make sense so far? You could also have a one-to-one relationship, though typically you wouldn't model that as multiple tables. Typically you would model that as just one table, right? Where a recipe has or let's say a ingredient has a type. It only has one type, so that's why we put it together in the same table. But in theory, those could be split into different tables if that made sense to you. We are going to talk now about a one-to-many relationship, which let's think about a recipe, and a recipe has photos. It could have 0 photos, it could have 1 photo, it could have 15 photos. A photo is not going to belong to many recipes, though. A photo belongs to a single recipe, right? You can kind of think of this like an Instagram user, right? I don't post a picture and then someone else owns it, right? So there's no many-to-many relationship for photos. As a user, I post a photo, it is my photo, it only belongs to me. We're going to do the same kind of modeling for these recipes, that you have a recipe, it has many photos, and it belongs to one recipe. This is a one recipe, too many photos relationship. Well, how would you model this if you were doing a spreadsheet? Let's say I had a spreadsheet and I had ingredients in that spreadsheet, and I had one recipe that had 10 photos and I had another recipe that had 0 photos. Well, the way that you could model that in a spreadsheet is you would have 10 columns for photos, and then the one that has 0 photos just would have 0 things in those columns, and then the one that has 10 has 10. The problem is now every single row has this giant waste of space, right? You have to have a column for as many as the one with the most. It's wasteful. And it's confusing, to be honest with you. So the way that we can do this, thinking again in terms of recipe, is we can have a first spreadsheet that has just the recipes, and we can have a second table, a second spreadsheet that has just photos in it, and then we can use IDs to reference each other. So that's what we're going to do, is we're going to have 2 tables. We're going to have a recipe table, and we're going to have a recipe photos table, and then we're going to join them together. Let's go ahead and start a recipes table. Nothing here is unique or interesting to you, except maybe that we're using a text here for body, because bodies could be potentially very long, right? They're recipes, so that they could have, it could be a 1,000-word essay in here if we really wanted it to be. So we're going to use the unbound type of text. Okay, I'm going to come over here to my database, and I'm just going to paste that business, create table, recipes, recipe ID, integer, primary key, title, varchar, not null, and a body of text, which could be null, be kind of a dumb recipe, but here we are. Okay, I now have a table there, great. And nothing here is really rocket science. Let's go ahead and insert a few recipes into our little table here. So again, I'm just going to copy and paste these because I don't want to type all of that. Okay, so now I have star from recipes you can see here I have 6 recipes. Pro tip, don't write a course while hungry. This is probably more for me than for you, but I got really hungry eating this course. I think literally the day that I wrote this, we ended up ordering dumplings because I really wanted some xiao long bao. And if you haven't tried any of these foods, you should, especially any of these foods, you should definitely order those. Okay. So now we have a variable amount of photos per recipe, right? Imagine this is like all recipes or something like that, right? Where, users can post photos of their recipes, right? And we want to associate with that. How are we going to do that? We're going to create a second table called recipes photos. Again, this is going to have a photo ID, which is going to be a primary key. It's going to have a recipe ID, which is just going to be an integer. I know some of you are asking me right now, Brian, what about foreign keys? Just hold on to it. We're going to talk about in the next chapter. Again, we're going to do it the naive way first, and then I'm going to show you how to do it with foreign keys. Okay, create table recipe photos. Go ahead and do that for me right now as well. Just to show you, we have ingredients, we have recipes, and we have recipes photos. And then we have all of the IDs, which are, great. They're all there. Cool. And then now, we're going to insert a bunch of stuff into recipes photos. Okay, so copy and paste that. So select star from recipes photos. You can see here we have a bunch of IDs, photo IDs, and then recipe IDs, which obviously these are not unique because again, one, which is a cookie, right, can have multiple photos. It does. It has 5 photos. You have something like jollof rice, which just has 1. You have something like khachapuri that has 5, and then you have something like xiao long bao, which has nothing, right? It has no photos in here. That was ID 6. So let's say I have shakshuka, and I want to select all of the photos for shakshuka. So what I can do here is I can select star from recipes photos where ID equals 4. Sorry, where recipe ID equals 4. Cool. Good. Now, I was able to do that just because I happen to know off the top of my head what the ID is for shakshuka. Obviously, your code is not going to know that, right? You need to have some sort of way to query the first table for the shakshuka to grab its ID and to use that ID to query the second table. You could say that we need to join our data. You should say that because that's what we're going to do. Let's go ahead and do that. We're going to do that, and we're going to type that out so you can kind of see that happening in real time. So let's write this query together. We're going to say select, and we want to get the title, the body for all these recipes, and we also want to get all of its photos, right? So how are we going to do that? We're going to want to get the recipe title. So I'm going to say recipe.title, recipe.body, and photo.url from recipes photos. Recipes photos is the name of the table, right? And I'm going to give it a nickname just for this query as photo, right? So this corresponds to that. It's so I don't have to continually write out recipes photos. I can write something shorter. And actually after this, I'm just going to do single letter characters because it's just way faster, but we're going to be a little bit explicit for this first one. Okay, then we're going to do an inner join. Okay, we're going to inner join recipes recipe. So notice the first one I have an S, the second one I don't. Again, I just chose the name recipe. We have to tell it what to join on. We're going to tell it to join on photo.recipe_id equals recipe.recipe_id. So now you can see here I have a title, I have the body, and I have the URL for all of these photos. Empanada, all of these, right? So that's what the join does. It allows us to reach into tables from two different tables and get combined data back for both of them. Because there's more in the photo table, that's why you get multiple copies of cookies, right? Because there are multiple cookies one. So later in code, we'd have to go back and collapse those down into one thing before we sent it down on the API. And that's like 90% it for at least inner joins. I would say most of the joins that I do are this inner join. We're literally about to talk about left join, right join, outer join, all of those kind of fun things. But inner join basically says like there should be a one-to-one matching, right? If there is a recipe with an ID in this one, there should be a corresponding one in the other table. And if it's lacking, don't include it. Notice there's no Chow Long Pao in here, Chow Long Bao, because it does not have any photos, right? Therefore, it is left out of the results set because there are no photos for it.